Before the First World War, before hundreds of millions of people died for the cause of freedom, there were no passports. There was no income tax. There was no sales tax. There was no draft. Governments did not control the money supply, or if they did, they were on the gold standard and were limited to the amount of money they could print because they had to back it up with gold. There was no nationalization of key industries. There were no farm subsidies. There was no welfare state. There was no military-industrial complex. There was no old age pensions. And I know some people think those things are good, but they're terrible. In terms of government power over the individual, I'm just looking at the big picture here. I'm just looking at the big picture. Because if an agency says that it wants to protect my freedoms, that it is fighting and that people, tens of millions of people have died to make me free, then all we really need to do, my friends, all we really need to do is to look at the world and the state of freedom within the world before this massive genocidal, murderous series of wars for the liberty of the human race. We need to look at how free the world was before these wars began and how free the world is after these wars were ended.
Let's go back about 100 years and ask the question, what did the Western world look like then, 100 years ago? And let me give you some quotes. First, from a British historian, A.J.P. Taylor, who describes pre-World War I Europe in the following way. A man could travel across the lengths and breadths of the continent without a passport until he reached the frontiers of Russia or the Ottoman Empire. He could settle in a foreign country for work or leisure without legal formalities, except occasionally some health requirements. Every currency was as good as gold. Nearly everywhere men could be sure of reasonably fair treatment in the courts of law. No one was killed for religious reasons. No one was killed for political reasons, despite the somewhat synthetic bitterness often shown in political disputes. Private property was everywhere secure. Now, second, a quote from John Maynard Keynes, not exactly one of my more favorite economists, but even those people sometimes, once in a while, say something correct. So Keynes, about this same period of pre-World War I Europe. The inhabitant of London could order by telephone, sipping his morning tea in bed, this applies more to Keynes than most other people, the various products of the whole earth in such quantity as he might see fit, and reasonably expect their early delivery upon his doorsteps. He could at the same moment and by the same means adventure his wealth in the natural resources and new enterprises of any quarter of the world, and share without exertion or even trouble in their prospective fruits and advantages. Or he could decide to couple the security of his fortunes with the good faith of the townspeople of any substantial municipality in any continent that fancy or information might recommend. He could secure forthwith, if he wished it, cheap and comfortable means of transit to any country or climate without passport or any other formality, could dispatch his servant to the neighboring office of a bank for such supply of the precious metals as might seem convenient, and could then proceed abroad to foreign quarters without knowledge of their religion, language, or customs, bearing coined wealth upon his person, and would consider himself greatly aggrieved and much surprised at the least interference. But most important of all, he regarded this state of affairs as normal, certain, and permanent, except in the direction of further improvement, and any deviation from it as aberrant, scandalous, and avoidable.
What has happened since? What has been the effect of all of these wars against government power, against dictatorship, against the expansion of the state class, against a military-industrial complex? What has been the result? Let's just look at the before and after. It's only 100 years. We're not talking about going back to ancient Athens here. What has been the result of all of these wars for freedom? Of all of these tens and hundreds of millions of people who cried and bled and died for freedom? We are much less free.